Hey guys, how y'all doing and ting and ting and ting? And today I'm gonna combine two of my favorite places that I like to react to, and that's Scotland and Canada. And I do believe this is uh, an expose into Scottish people being sent to Canada. Let's go ahead on YouTube and see what this is all about.
I'm Bruce Fumé. In February 1813, this hotel was owned by the Marquis of Stafford. Having married the local heiress and landowner, he was responsible for some of the worst excesses at Highland clearances, before then being honoured with the title Duke of Sutherland. The hotel was called the Sutherland Arms in those days, and it was a key location in the struggle between humble crofters who wanted to farm the land to which our ancestors belonged, and one of the richest men in England who decided that he could make even more money by throwing them off it. In those days, I would have boycotted the Sutherland Arms, but today it's called the Golspie Inn. Actually, the locals still call it the Sutherland Arms, but it's just been bought by mates of mine who are in the middle of renovating it, and they've given us access to help tell you the tale. But first, I have to tell you about events that took place in Strathclyde Schoolhouse. If you're interested in the people, places and events in Scottish history, then click the subscribe button at the bottom right of the screen. In the meantime, let me tell you a story.
Let's hear it, brother. Let's hear that story, brother. Yeah.
A meeting was planned for Tuesday the 2nd of February 1813 in Strathclyde Parish School. The meeting had been proposed by William Young and Patrick Seller, the two men who were the impetus behind the depopulation of this strath to introduce large-scale sheep farming. The meeting was to sign a bond between the estate that Young and Seller represented and the current tenants. You see, William Young had bought additional land for the Marquis and Countess of Stafford on Scotland's wild and windy northern coastline. An expert book of the day, published by a man called John Henderson, said that because Sutherland's north coast was exposed to frequent rains and stormy weather, its crops of corn were so stunted in their growth as to be too short for the sickle. But Young hadn't bought the estate for the Staffords or himself to farm, but for the poor suckers who were about to sign this bond. At a recent soiree with beer and sandwiches, Young had explained to the reasonable people of Strathclyde that the land was of marvellous quality. Each person evicted from the land in which they currently rear 20 to 30 cattle here would be given 2 to 3 acres on this exposed north coast land to rear a couple of cows and grow some corn. And the corn wasn't stunted. Our marketing people are calling it pygmy corn. Smaller? Yes. Lower yielding? Yes. But it's cute, it's cuddly, and if you package it in colourful, shiny boxes with cartoon pictures of hobbits, we think there's a market.
That's marketing for you, boy. They drop some marketing. Let me tell you a little marketing scheme that modern day they're using now, okay? In a neighborhood where people are struggling to make ends meet, a certain company want to donate. Instead of they donating directly, what they do is they have people buy the product and then they donate it to the place that they're going to donate it to. Now, let's think here. It's a marketing thing. The customer is going to think that the company is doing a good deed by donating it. But my suspicion is when the company goes to the place, they don't say that our customers are donating this to you. They're more than likely going to say, we are donating this to you. So they make money because the people buy it to be donated, and they don't get the credit for it, but the company does. And on top of that, they probably get a tax break for donating that stuff. And these are people, a lot of whom can't afford it. is thinking they're doing a good deed. Not much unlike this situation here. This was more dire. You know, understand what I'm saying? But it's just all marketing, man. It's all about that money, boy. You know what I mean? You know, well, somebody's going to make money off of it, and it's usually not the people who have been hoodwinked with marketing, words, emotions. They use emotions to garner profit from people. You know, because hey, if I'm giving you this, like he's saying, if I'm giving you this amount of land, even though the product is different, you have to be a marketing genius to sell it to other people, not knowing that stuff, not taking into consideration the whole picture.
Anyway,
Craziness.
was to sign this bond. Now, the Strathcaldon and Crofters' lack of enthusiasm for uprooting their homes for a Wendy house on a rock face so that Young and Seller could set up sheep farms on their land had caused a bit of a stooshy a month earlier. I actually made a video about that, and I'll leave a link to that later. So, the Sheriff Depute arrived with a deputation to be met by around 200 Crofters. Now, I'm not going to tell you what they suggested the Sheriff Depute do with the bond, but if you've ever tried to smuggle heroin over a Turkish border crossing, I'll tell you what, said the Sheriff Depute. Why don't I spend the night in Helmsdale, and anyone who changes their mind can come down in the morning and sign the bond? Nobody went down to sign the bond. But they did send a guy called John Bannerman with a letter in which they offered to pay the same rent as the sheep farmers proposed in order to stay on their ancestral land. When John Bannerman arrived, it turns out that the Sheriff Depute wasn't that interested in the content of the letter, but he did want to know exactly who'd written it, who contributed towards it, and who agreed with it. When John Bannerman refused to give them that information, he was arrested, taken to Dornoch, and locked up in jail. Oh, there was all sorts of talk about the injustice, the deceit, what to do. Do we rescue him? In the end, they had a whip round to raise the bail money to get him out. That was the equivalent of 4 years' earnings for a teacher at the time. So the Sheriff Depute went down a different route. After interrogating the shepherds that had been involved in the previous stooshy with the Crofters, they got enough names to dispatch a sheriff officer with 4 men and warrants back up the Strath. Do you think they saw him coming? Do you think he was welcomed in? Do you think any of the men he saw were available? The sheriff officer said, look, all they want to do is to hold an evidence gathering interview. All those named in the warrants need to do is to turn up on the 10th of February at the Sutherland Arms and the matter will be resolved. And that's what brings us here. As I say, this was the Sutherland Arms back in those days, built 5 years earlier, and like pretty much everything else in Sutherland, it was owned by Lord and Lady Stafford. Come inside. On the left is the Sutherland coat of arms. On the right is Granville Leveson Gower, the Marquis of Stafford. My mate found this when he took up the floor during the renovations to upgrade this hotel. Now, it's not original to when this place was built 5 years before the events that I'm describing. Actually, I think it's linoleum made in Kirkcaldy. The point is that with or without these crests, folk would be under no illusion. If you were a crofter coming into this hotel, you were entering the domain of your lords and masters. The offenders had been told to arrive for questioning on the 10th. Of course, when the handful of offenders arrived, waiting for them would be William Young, Patrick Seller, the Sheriff Depute, the Sheriff Officer, and several constables. This was a trap to lock the identified miscreants up, just like John Bannerman before. What the authorities didn't realise was that from up and down Strathclyde and Strathbora, who knew that their time would come as well, men and women had got up before light to walk to Golspie, arriving in small groups of 5 or 6 each so as not to alert suspicion. When noon came and the authorities coiled to spring the trap, they looked out this window and saw the biggest mass of people ever gathered in one place in Sutherland. Each one was armed with a cudgel and waiting for the constables to do their worst. Suddenly, it was the authorities that were trapped. You go out and speak to them. No, you go out and speak to them. No, you go out and speak. Who the fuck is Spartacus anyway? It's no me. Finally, Patrick Seller came out to tell the crowd that they were foolish if they thought they could defy the king and fight against the laws and rights of Britain. Someone in the crowd pointed out that it was their brothers and sons who were on the continent fighting against Napoleon for the king, laws and rights of Britain. Seeing 2 of the culprits that they had targeted in the crowd, the sheriff depute told the sheriff officer to take a group of constables and arrest them. John Sutherland and Donald Polson went to give themselves up, but the crowd pulled them back. As the constables moved forward, a man raised his cudgel and stepped in to bar the way. His name was Robert Bruce. I wonder if they for a moment considered the significance. Or is it that the name Bruce brings with it his own courage, strength, and nobility?
Don't be so stupid.
For Young and Sellers and the Staffords when they found out, this act of defiance was the limit. These backward, primitive, yoke-coal rabble-rousers should know their place. The law was there for a reason. If the scales of justice weren't tipped by the weight of property, what were they there for? If justice couldn't be implemented by constables and sheriff officers, there were always the troops. Land and belongings are an emotive thing, isn't it? Sometimes when I tell foreign guests that I take on tour that here in Scotland there's no trespass law and we have the right to roam, they bluster about letting people walk on their land. And yet it strikes me that when it came to it, they'd expect those same ordinary men to go to Thornfield and protect that land for them.
You know, he talks about law and justice there. But the way humans think, that all could be relative. And I say that because, you know, if somebody implements a law, they could call that law a just law, even if the law is skewed towards their benefit. And then they expect everybody else to go along with that. And then a system of indoctrination to get the people to think that that law is just for everybody. Once again, it may depend on marketing. How do you market that justice to the people to get them to believe that it's beneficial to them? You could do it with material things, you could do it with money. But in these parts where I am here, they could do it with stuff like morality clauses, religion, politics, or a combination of all three, of which I see here a lot. Like people saying things or doing things that isn't in their best interest. Like I was talking to a lady at work the other day and she was complaining about people who were demonstrating against the misuse of our environment. You know, they were environmental protesters. And this guy, who of course was part of the conservative camp, wanted to run them over, and she thinks it's wrong that they're doing this and it's wrong that they're doing that, and protests should be banned. So I told her, let me ask you this, my lady. What if they were protesting higher food prices? Would you still want them to be ran over? Because I heard you just a few minutes ago complain about higher food prices. And that just baffled her. She just never thought about that. Which brings in the idea of why aren't people demonstrating against the cost of living skyrocketing here? They just complain every day and blame the administration when food prices has been going up for centuries. What do you think will happen? The next president's going to come in and say, "Oh, these food prices are too high. Let's bring it down." They're not going to do that. They haven't done it before, not to my knowledge. And that's what I mean by people doing things, saying things, or believing in things that's against their best interest. I guess I went off on a tangent there, but it's kind of similar and relevant to what's happening here. If these people didn't come out and protest, they would have run ramshot over them. And the one guy who was saying, about the law and justice, but it's for their benefit, not for the people's benefit here. Because they want that land to get their sheep going. Who cares about these people? Let's give them the crappy pieces of land where they won't go struggle and stuff. Don't complain. We're being just. We're going to give you crappy stuff and keep your good stuff. I think that's fair. The things we do.
The problem with calling out the local militia was that half of the militia were the very men standing here in the crowd awaiting eviction. The other half were sympathisers. This time the sheriff deputy in Donner wouldn't be enough. Send for the sheriff himself in Edinburgh.
Edinburgh.
I don't know if the sheriff took tea and cream scones in the lounge of the Sutherland Arms / Golspie Inn. What I do know is that every member of the local militia in Sutherland was ordered to hand in their weapons. And then the Lord Advocate authorised Fort George to send regular troops from the British Army. Now remember, there were people still alive that stood at Culloden. I'm going to leave a link to one of my must-watch videos about one of them at the end.
There's a place named Culloden here, just up the way out here. Huh. That's pretty cool, interesting there.
Just think how much World War II, the Cold War, Vietnam still impacts on our psyche today, and consider the impact of disarming Highlanders and sending British troops. The troops came, and the men started presenting themselves for interview. But whilst this was happening, something else was happening in parallel. Actually, I'm still here. But William MacDonald, a local man from Brora, was a recently retired recruiting sergeant from the 93rd Regiment. He was already in London with instructions, travel expenses and a slush fund of £1,000. His distinguished military service and connections earned him access and influence. One of the people he met was Frederick, Duke of York, the second son of King George III. To him, MacDonald put a proposal that the region would supply 700 volunteers to serve anywhere in the British Army on condition that their mothers, sisters and elderly were guaranteed not to be evicted. Imagine that. The improvement that you're offered is so unappealing that you'd offer up your son to war with Napoleon or whatever other danger the British Army might put him in, rather than starve on that windswept rocky outcrop. Imagine that you as a son would rather volunteer than see your family evicted. Imagine the country's wealthiest landowner and his agent so heartless that when offered the same rent as the shepherds proposed, insisted that only a fate worse than death would do for the hitherto clansmen. It's maybe not surprising that the people of Sutherland suggested this deal. This had been the Highland way. The blood of your sons in return for land. But when that blood had been spilled, the land was given over to sheep. When this route was blocked, Sergeant MacDonald found another. He met with a Colonel Archibald MacLean, a Highland Gael from Argyll. If these Sutherland farmers couldn't stay in their homes, then what if, when the 700 men came forward, their families could be provided with travel to British North America? You might call it Canada. Rather than starve on the bleak, inhospitable coast to where Lord Stafford would send them, would the British Army accept 700 volunteers then? Two incidents coincided. In 1812, the Americans decided to invade what is now Canada, and the Earl of Selkirk had bought land at Red River but was struggling to find people to populate it. If only there was a way to get a regiment of troops and people to settle in Canada. By the time Sergeant MacDonald got back to Sutherland to collect a list of those willing to take the Canadian deal, Young and Sellers were making their own list of people that were prepared to move to the Sutherland coast. The number of names on the baddies list was 12. The Canadian list gained over 1,000. It looked like Colonel Archibald Maclean would have a new regiment to lead, and Lord Selkirk would have colonists for the Red River. On the wall of the church that we visited in Strathcaldonnan earlier, there's a plaque which reads, "In memory of George Bannerman of Caldonnan, great-grandfather of the Right Honourable John G. Diefenbaker, PC, QC, MP, Prime Minister of Canada, 1957 to 63, and all of the Selkirk settlers from Caldonnan who in 1813 migrated to the Red River settlement to what is now the province of Manitoba." I'd say he was of noble stock. I've heard that people say that these clearances were justified because the land was too poor to make a living. There may be some truth, but how it would force the folk from produce exporting land to less productive land help that. I've heard folks say that people left willingly. I'm sure some did, but what's clear is that they're volunteering, and there's volunteering. If you missed the first video in this series, then you can click the white tab up there to find it. If you haven't watched my video on the last Jacobite, then it's a great story with some fantastic scenery, and you'll find that by clicking this link here. In the meantime, how many dockers could be lamb ally?
Wow. That's kind of like just saying, trading, hey, listen, you go there, you know what I mean? That's where we want you. You know what I mean? Either way, we won't take your land from you. Get your tail over there. You're going to join the army or the military and help us fight off the Americans. And we're going to get it populated. Wow. People say that's a choice, but that's not much of a choice. You're leaving everything you know. I'm an immigrant. I know how it feels to leave everything you know. Anyway, I hope you guys learned something from this one here. Hope you guys are having a good weekend, great weekend, taking care of each other. I'm going to leave links to other videos that I've reacted to in Scotland. You know, check them out. Keep the watching going. In the meantime, y'all take care of each other, all right? Cool runnings.